and welcome to the very first edition of Shall We Sing a Song for You, a brand new podcast hosted by me, Alan Parry, football commentator for BBC, ITV and Sky for more years than I care to remember, and Gareth Ainsworth, successful player who had a stellar career playing in the Premier League and every division of the Football League, and is now, of course, a very successful manager. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, no, not yet another football podcast, but believe me, this one is going to be different. Of course, we'll be discussing the latest football topics of the moment, but we're combining people's passion for football with their love of music. Some of the most famous stars in the world of entertainment are big football fans. Think about Ed Sheeran at Ipswich, Rod Stewart at Celtic, Noel Gallagher, Manchester City. Really, the list is endless. So we'll be talking to football personalities about their love of music and also to people from the world of entertainment about their love of football. Which, of course, makes Gareth Ainsworth the perfect co-host because he's not just a successful football player and manager, he's also lead singer in a rock band called the Cold-Blooded Hearts. Gareth, we'll talk about your football career in a moment, but first, how did you become such a big music fan?
Isn't everyone? Music's everywhere and, every day, and I suppose there is people who like it more than others, but growing up, I'll have to say really fortunate. Mum was a singer, a big band singer, back in the days, in the Mecca bingo halls and the big halls. 4,000 people turn up and she had a massive orchestra behind her and she was this soul singer on stage. I think she's on the same bill as Dusty Springfield and played the Cavern and all the Northwest stuff. She was incredible. So I had that for a start, and then Dad was a big rocker. So Dad, one of the few people who's seen Hendrix in Blackpool. I have to say, he had a cool jacket with Hendrix studs on the back. Massive Who fan. So growing up was Mum and the big band singer, but cool songs. It was a real talented girl, and she actually turned down a record contract to stay in Blackburn, marry my dad, and have me and my brother. So I'm not sure how she looks at me sometimes, thinking, but. Dad was rock and roll through, and I remember passing my driving test. This is the 80s, so this is big moments, for a 17-year-old kid. You pass your driving test, and I had a cassette player in the car, but I didn't have any cassettes.
I'd love to say I don't remember what they are.
So a cassette player in the car. My dad said, "Here you go, take this," and it was the story of the Who, and that was my first ever, and I absolutely nailed it day after day. It was one of them where you couldn't rewind. You had to. Remember, you had to fast forward and turn the cassette over and all that to get back. So the story of the Who was, and that was my influence then. I was hooked on rock and roll.
So going back to football, you said you were born and brought up in Blackburn, and I know you were a season ticket holder when you were just a kid. Then you went to the club as a youth. It must have been one of the biggest disappointments of your career when they ended up rejecting you.
Yeah, biggest highlight really at 16. You've been a season ticket for 10 years. There's a striker there called Simon Garner, who's my absolute hero. He's probably why I'm a footballer myself. Wanted to be him, scoring goals, and signed as an apprentice back in that day. That was, I think, 86, 87. And then 2 years later, was told by Don Mackay that I wasn't good enough. So you can get on your bike, In them days, it was like no exit route. There's no go here, go there. It's like that's it, son. You're not going to make it. I'll tell you what, though, AP. About 2 years later, I did go to Preston. I played for Preston, made it at Preston as a pro, and we played Fulham. And Don Mackay was the Fulham manager. And he, I remember after the game, he waited for me in the tunnel. Said, "Oh, I knew you'd make it. I did that on purpose to build some resilience." And I thought, yeah, all right, mate. You didn't think I'd make it, so that was a nice moment. But yeah, tough because big Blackburn fan and that was my hometown.
Okay, well, without further ado, let's introduce our star guest on Shall We Sing a Song for You. He had a fantastic playing career as well, over 700 games at the very highest level for Coventry, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle, West Ham, Manchester City. The names just roll off the tongue, and 78 caps for England. He then embarked on a career as a coach and manager at club and international level. A very warm welcome to Stuart Pearce. Stuart, thanks for joining us. I'll let Gareth quiz you about your love of music because that's very much his scene. But first I want to ask you about the club you played for and later managed, Nottingham Forest. I looked this up. Less than 3 years ago, they were playing in the Championship. When they got back into the Premier League, they had 2 successive seasons where they just avoided relegation. Now they're right up there with the leaders and chasing a place in Europe. Has that surprised you and has that pleased you?
It certainly pleased me. There's no doubt about that. And before I forget, I've got to tell Gareth that Don Mackay sold me from Coventry to Nottingham Forest. So we both had a connection with Don. So I think he done me a favour more than he done you. But anyway, it's pleased me greatly, Forest's rise and what we're seeing at the moment. The atmosphere around the City Ground's been absolutely incredible. I've been up there for games this year. I'm there Saturday week against Brighton, so that'll be some game. It surprised me they've got there that quickly, to be quite honest with you. I think that the club, and Steve Cooper's got to take a lot of credit for this, has been built on solid ground. I think they've recruited extremely well. And to be fair, the way they're going at the moment, I think the result against Liverpool probably convinced 1 or 2 in the city and in the team of Nottingham that, hang on, we might be here at the end of the season, somewhere around that top 4, and that will be incredible for the club.
People doubted Leicester City when they were at a similar stage, weren't they? And they went on to win the title. Is that unrealistic to think that Forest could do that?
I think it is. I think it's a step too far. And the only reason I say that is because I've seen Liverpool enough this season to suggest they've been unbelievable. They really have. I don't think... and they've got so many interchangeable strikers. If a couple are off form, you can bring Jota on, you can bring Diaz on, Núñez, Salah and... Van Dijk have been incredible. So that's the only thing that's going to hold Forest back. And anybody else that's going to challenge Liverpool, I think they're going to take some catching.
Interestingly, Forest have had such a successful season despite having one of the lowest possession statistics in the whole of the Premier League. What's your opinion about the current obsession with playing out from the back, which has even spread down to the lower divisions of the EFL?
I think if it's done for the right reasons, all well and good. I go and see a lot of games where I think... it's a disaster waiting to happen. You're sat in the stand watching games or commentating on games and thinking you're continually trying to do things and the opposition are setting traps for you and you're just ceding possession. And as I say, we'll probably see Southampton drop out the league on the back of doing that. Certainly Burnley did last year as well. It's almost suicide football. I encourage teams to play and teams that I've been involved in to play, but somewhere down the line you've got to say, if the ball ends up in the back of your net through making a mistake at the back, you're doing something wrong inherently. I'm
sure this is a subject that Gareth has got a very strong opinion about as well.
I'm definitely happy. I'm known as a manager that doesn't have possession, When people say what your style is, I'm destroy and counter. That's what I do. But the reason I do that, and probably the reason at QPR it wasn't as good as Wickham and Shrewsbury's going okay at the moment, but it is because I like having that underdog mentality. I haven't got the best players, so I set traps. As Stu says, that I set traps. I'll look at the opposition, I'll destroy them, and then counter them. And I think that there's a little bit of snobbery that's not great football. But when you inherit a club or you inherit some players, if they're not ready to play out, if they're not good enough to play out, why would you do that? Why would you choose to force them to play out when they're not comfortable doing it, where the others will play out and you can set traps? And this is my big thing about football, I think. But also it's taught me what I am. I might not be able to go to a Man City or a Chelsea and totally dominate possession. I might be this manager. I might be this guy who goes, you know what, I'll get the underdogs all the time and I'll make them better than they can be. And I think that's a nice thing because I don't have to have that possession. I like what I do. It's effective. And I'm definitely with Stuart. Some teams will do it no matter what. And I'm thinking, why? Why are you doing this? You certainly can play a different way. And there's no template to say this is perfect football. Football for me will always be about that end score, that end result. The only stat that matters to me is that scoreline at the end of the game, and that's important.
Do you think having that philosophy has stopped you getting bigger jobs than the ones you've had?
Absolutely. I think people will overlook me and go, he can only manage that certain way. But when you talk about Notts Forest not having great possession, they got Wood up front. They'll go into him because he's a big man. And that probably you look at Spurs for instance this season. wow, total football at times, no matter what. No matter what. I think there's a stat came out the other day on goal kicks. I think they've hit not 3%, just 3 goal kicks long all season. The rest have all played out. And for me, that's like, wow, okay, that's your template and that's what you believe in. And I totally respect that, but I couldn't do that. I need to get the best out of my players, know what they're good at. And I think that's the art of being a manager, as well as having brilliant sessions and brilliant patterns of play. That's great as a manager. But also knowing what you've got and going, we can't do that. Let's do something else to win a game. I think that's good management too.
I think that's the beauty of football, though. The fact that there are so many diverse ways of playing the game.
Yeah.
It's not... There's fads at the moment, and these fads go round in complete circles. Well, I've seen it so many times. You hang around the game long enough, and you see things come round, and people think, "Oh, hang on, they've just invented
going into midfield now." And we'll attack with the 3. They are fads.
And it's just simple as that. And I think the beauty of football and what makes football so appealing is there's so many different styles of play. If we all played exactly the same way, all tried to build from the back, all sat with a low block, my goodness me, I'm not sure the fans would want that.
Boring.
I love going to watch Tottenham.
When you watch Scottish football, it's like a throwback, isn't it?
Mm.
And actually, I find it more exciting to watch as a neutral, especially the Rangers-Celtic games, because, it's all hell for leather.
I'm going to apologise to Scottish football fans now because I know what you've just said there. No, I agree totally. I do agree because they will go hell for leather at it. They'll go. I mean, there was a game recently in the Premier League where I think it was Liverpool Forest, where it was basketball then. It was fantastic to watch. You know what I mean? It really was.
Yeah,
and do you know what?
Yeah.
Do you know what makes me laugh sometimes? When teams are 1-0 down, they'll try and play out the play. When it gets to the last 5 minutes, I don't care what team it is, they'll shell it just to try and get back in that game. So all this philosophy thing, last 5 minutes, 1-0 down, the best teams will still shell it. And I love it. I'm the same as Stuart, That's the beauty of football.
Stuart, going back to your early days as a pro, just before that, you'd actually trained as an electrician, I believe. Is it true that when you went to Nottingham Forest, you actually advertised in the official matchday programme your services as a sparky?
Well, I mean, I didn't turn pro till I was 21, and fortunately for me, I just qualified as an electrician by 6 weeks. So I had a trade behind me before I said goodbye to the council. I was working for Brent Council at the time, said goodbye, signed an 18-month contract. My boss at the council said, we'll keep your job open if it doesn't work out, which is fantastic. I'm not sure it's still there, but I haven't asked.
It worked out, all right.
It worked out okay, I got there. When I joined Coventry, I set up my own company, so I traded in the afternoon and was a professional during the day. And then when I got to meet Cloughy, 23 years old, walked into his office and he said to me, I hear you're an electrician, son. I said, that's right. He said, do you mend irons? I went, yeah. He went, my barber's irons broke. Can you have a look at it? I said, of course. He said, I'll bring it in tomorrow. So we signed contracts. I signed my contract then. I thought, because I had a bit of credit, because he asked me a favour, I asked him a favour. I said, do you mind if I advertise in the programme? I'm an electrician. So he said, not a problem at all. So I had an advert in the programme for the best part of 2 years, probably.
That is amazing.
So, did you get much business out of it?
Yeah. I mean, I wired Steve Sutton's house. I wired John Steele's stables when I was at Coventry. Peter Barnes, the winger, I put his lights up in his house. Kirk Stevens, I've done these. And people used to ring me up. I remember we played a League Cup game against Brighton for Forest one evening. The next morning, I had a business line and a home line in my house. The business line went, I thought, brilliant, and got some work. Answered the phone, some bloke come on, is that Stuart Pearce? I said, yeah. Is that Stuart Pearce, the electrician? I said, yeah. He went, that's incredible. He said, I'm a Brighton fan. I was at the game last night. I'm an electrician as well. He said, I can't believe it's you. I said, yeah, it is. I said, do me a favour, mate. Couldn't get off the line, could you? I'm waiting for some work. He couldn't believe it. It was actually me. But I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed electrical work. It gives you a distraction, if you like. And bear in mind, I took a wage cut from an electrician and part-time footballer to join Coventry in the equivalent of the Premier League. Yeah. So I've had to take a £30 wage cut from what I was doing as a part-timer to go and have the privilege of playing against Liverpool, Manchester United. It was incredible. So it was to make ends meet in some ways.
You had an incredible 12 years, didn't you, at Nottingham Forest? A lot of it under Brian Clough. you must have a fund of stories about Cloughie. What are your favourites?
Well, the iron one was always a good one. You know, the follow-up to the iron one was I bought the iron in the following day, having looked at it, and the element had gone. So I bought it in and said, boss, I said, your element's gone. It'll cost you more. You're better off buying a new one. He said, fantastic, son. Beautiful. You're a very nice man. Well done, and all this, you know, as he does. The following day, he walked in the dressing room holding the iron up, declaring that the new left-back was an absolute fraud. He told me he was an electrician. He can't even mend the iron. So that was that. Where do we go, Cloughie? My first international call-up, I was 25 years old. I was his captain at the time. And a journalist come up to me and said, you've been picked in the England squad. This was 87. I was as nervous as a kitten. Bear in mind, 3.5 years ago, I'm working for the council as an electrician. Now we've got Brazil at Wembley and Scotland away, the first 2 games at the end of that season. Kenny Sampson was injured, so he weren't playing, so I knew I was the only left-back in the squad, so I thought, I'm playing. Following day, I come into training. One of the young apprentices come down the dressing room and said, the boss wants to see you. Cloughie wants to see me. So I thought, brilliant, you know, it might be wage rise or a pat on the back, you know, fantastic. So I walked into his office and the conversation went word for word, and I'll cover up the odd word for radio. I knocked on the door, walked in. He went, sit down, son. And then he looked up and went, I see you're in the England squad. I said, that's right, boss. He said, do you think you're good enough? I went, I'm not sure. He went, I don't, F off. That was the conversation, word for word, I had on my first England call.
Oh, my God.
It was typical of him. He was delivering the message, keep your feet on the floor, we pay your wages, and don't get above your station. And for me, it was brilliant motivation, because I weren't sure I was good enough stepping on the stage with people I'd watched on telly, Hoddle and Butcher and Schilt and all those. These are the gods of the game, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden you're thinking, am I good enough to be on that stage? And when he delivered those words, almost before I took his kind advice and done one, I got to the door and I thought, I'll show you. And I had someone to prove wrong. And it was such a powerful, I mean, you might have had that in your career as well. When you've got someone to prove wrong, it's a really powerful thing. And it was brilliant for me.
Back to me when I got released, but also in today's game, you know, you struggle to find those characters, you know, the managers like that, who it was a great motivational tool, that, you know, and now you've been in all sorts of trouble, even saying anything to players now. You got to be so careful, but some amazing.
Well, one of the things about football is, I mean, you kind of referred to it when you talked about the style of play you've had, is once you've got a label, it's very hard to lose in football, isn't it? So you are known for long ball. You were known for your uncompromising style, should we call it that, which led to the nickname Psycho, which I always thought was very disrespectful for a player who had played at the level you played at. Did you resent that nickname?
In all honesty, no, because it was delivered by the Nottingham Forest fans. I never used to go out and warm up. Let me tell you this story. When I joined Coventry, I used to go and warm up with the players. Everyone used to go out on the pitch and warm up. About 2:15 out we went, everyone went out. Kenny Hibbett, who used to play for Wolverhampton Wanderers, joined Coventry, never used to go out and warm up. And it took me a month to get, because I was a young, you know, upstart coming from non-league. And I thought, we're all going out and Kenny's in the dressing room. He ain't going out to warm up. What's that all about? And I respected Kenny. And I got the courage to turn around and say, Ken, why don't you go and warm up? And his answer was brilliant. He looked at his watch and went, I get paid hour and a half, I ain't doing it anymore. And I absolutely creased up. And I thought, you know what? If it's good enough for Kenny Hibbett, it's got to be good enough for me. You know what I mean? So I didn't go out and warm up. So when I did go out, I had that mentality. When you go out, you never see a boxer go in a ring, warm up, go out and come back in again. So I always had the mentality. I had a really stringent warm-up routine, but inside the dressing room, in the corridor, running up and down, stretching with the physio. It was very dogged and very to time. Everything was. So when I went out, I went straight up to the Trent End. They christened me Psycho, and off it went. It was a bit of theatre in some ways, and obviously, you know, within 5 minutes of the game kicking off, the right wingers getting it as well. So the fans, I think this day and age, sometimes I look at players and I think, have an impact on the game straight away. You know, win your first header. Do something that's really going to get the fans. The fans are all excited, then it all quietens down, the fans get nervous, and then we pass it around the back for 3 hours, you know what I mean? And the atmosphere at grounds just gets crushed. I go the other way. Come on, pump your fists up to the home fans. That gets them excited. Then go and achieve something, either a run or a pass, or you win a header. Do something that's going to get the fans to the party, and all of a sudden, everyone's at it, sort of thing.
I've heard players say they don't hear the fans sometimes. I'm absolutely disagreeing with that.
No one believes that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't be, especially the positions we play. By the way, I wasn't ever one of those right wingers that got the first tackle out. And we were talking about this earlier. I'm glad to say I don't think we ever crossed paths, played against a few that Stuart managed. But honestly, hearing the fans and the positions we played, fullback and winger, you're on the touchline.
You hear everything.
You don't hear all the fans. You hear individual fans. It's like, and if you're having a bad time,
you can
hear about it. You know, yeah.
Stuart, 78 caps is a fantastic record for England. Who were the best players that you played with over those games?
I would always pick the best as Paul Gascoigne. I was fortunate that I made my debut in 87, Gazza made his in 88, so we near enough played near enough every game that I played, he was on the pitch, or vice versa, you know what I mean? He was an incredible talent. He had arrogance in a good way on the pitch. We went to our first major tournament together in the 1990 World Cup, and he was just incredible. He took the World Cup by storm in his character, and he would take massive international players on thinking, I'm better than you, you know, and I admired that about him, and he was incredible. I mean, he's record for England, if I'm not mistaken, 58 appearances, 4 defeats, and probably I think I had 78 appearances, 6 defeats over that period of time, which was a really good period of time for England. 2 semi-finals in a couple of major tournaments, which was way beyond what we'd achieved for a very, very long time for England. And just Gazza was probably one of those. And if you ask me for a level of consistency, Des Walker I played with at Forest, who got the opportunity to go to Sampdoria. Not many English players or British players go to Italy in the 80s or early 90s. I gather that Juventus offered $5 million for Des after the 1990 World Cup, which was a massive amount of money in those days, and Forest turned it down. So the following year he went to Sampdoria, but his level of consistency was incredible.
What a player. What a player.
And who was the most difficult opponent you came up against?
It's strange. People expect you to say some sort of big name on the international stage. The worst one I had a problem with was a fella called Mark Ward. He played Northwich Victoria, so he had that tough seat.
I played there, back in the late 90s.
So I played against him at Northwich. He was tough as teak, only 5'6", 5'7". You go inside and outside, low centre of gravity, and if you knocked him down, he'd get up and smile at you. And at West Ham, whenever I played at West Ham, he always had a good game against me. So when I had the opportunity to join West Ham, it's always in the back of my mind, is it the ground or just Mark Ward that I had a problem with, you know what I mean? So as luck happens, when I went there, he'd gone then, and the home fans were on my side, you know, but I had probably as many problems with him. I think I got taken off in my career, barring injuries, on 3 occasions for bad form, and every time Cloughy come up, put the board up himself. No, it was always the trainer, apart from when he took the captain off, and then it was that at the City Ground or that at Upton Park. He took me off at Upton Park, and every time he took me off, I was livid. I can assure you I was livid. And but to be fair, it was one of those. He may be our captain, but he's awful today. You're off, you know. And that was him again, Cloughy.
That's a big difference. Yeah. You can count the amount of times he was taken off on one hand. I certainly can't, you know. I ain't got no fingers and toes, so yeah.
Getting back to the music theme again, Italia 90 must have been one of your highlights in your international career. Back home, Nessun Dorma was the theme tune for, I think it was the BBC TV, and it really took off. What were the players listening to in your hotel in between games?
It was interesting. We had, I think it was Janice Long, and I bumped into Janice Long, I'm sure I did, not so long ago, and they had all the England players come in. You had to say your favourite record because they were going to play it on Radio 1 or something. Okay. So they're all coming in, and It was, oh, good God, what the rest listening to, I do not know. You know, the normal fare,
The
you
90s,
know. You know,
right.
bit of that, bit of this. And she said to me, oh, what's your favourite record? Is there anything you want me to play? I went, yeah, Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine, Only Living Boy in New Cross.
Yes.
And I bumped into her probably about 10 years ago, and she went, I always remember, I can't remember what any of the other players said that they liked and all this. It was always middle of the road, all this shite, you know what I mean? She said, but I can remember you saying Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine, you know what I mean? So
I'll say Sheriff Fatman to him.
Well, what a
great song that was.
It's quality.
I'm going to take a back seat here because he's itching to ask you about your love of music, and in particular punk rock. Punk rock being one of the many things in life I have absolutely no knowledge of. So what was a guess?
Listen, all I want to say is that in 1987, 88, when I'm sort of 15 at school, Stu's about 7, 8 years older than me, I see this guy playing for England with long hair, and I'm thinking, this guy is my idol, I'm telling you. And then the way he was smashing people, I was like, and then I find out you're into the punk rock. I'm like, this is amazing. So honestly, massive respect, Stuart. You know, you were a massive idol of mine growing up. But I want to delve a bit more into the music, which is why we're here, you know, and we do the sport, but the music's going to be big for us. And Massive Stranglers.
Yeah.
Is that your band, would you say?
Without a doubt, they are. They're the band I've seen the most. I've probably seen them 300 times, maybe. Been in one of their videos.
And this song, yeah. Tell me about that. How did that happen?
I've got to know the band quite well over the years because I go quite regular, you know. And I think it was might have been the back end of the 80s that the boys at Forest knew that I liked the Stranglers, and we used to go and watch them.
Yeah.
And one of them turned around to me and said, why don't you write to them and tell them, you know what I mean, that you're a big fan of the band and all this. So I said, all right, fine. So sent a letter off, got to know Paul Roberts, the front man at the time, and then Baz Warren's become a big friend of mine who's a new front man, met JJ and the rest of the band as well, Jet Black and whatever. And to be honest with you, it probably all started in 76. Whatever music's about when you're 14 to 16-year-old, whatever age you are, it doesn't matter. That is normally the music that you pin your colours on. I'm sat at home in 1976. The punk thing is just started to explode. I live in London, northwest London. And Thames Television News comes on, and it's the Bill Grundy programme.
Yeah, I remember.
The story goes that Queen pulled out, and they got this up-and-coming band called the Sex Pistols on. And they come on with Susie Sue was on stage with them as well. And Bill Grundy was half cut, so he's goading the Pistols, Jonesy and whatever. And I'd never heard anyone swear on telly before. You know, it just didn't happen. And they were effing and blinding on telly. And you know that rebellious bit about it, and you thought, I want a piece of this.
I remember the interview. He's got I said a naughty word, and then he asked him what to say, and he's unbelievable interview.
And that sort of hooked us, and from then went to see. I was fortunate I was brought up in London, so London was really good. Camden was good. The Marquee Club was brilliant to see bands. I went to see the Lurkers were one of the bands I really liked, and I was in the crowd one night. This is almost incredible, really. You know, when you're a kid and you're looking for a little bit of excitement and whatever. We went to see the Lurkers at the Marquee. It must have been 77, 78, don't know when it was. And their second album come out, God's Lonely Men. And my mate rang me up and said, have you seen The Inner Sleeve? I went, no. So I've had a look. There's a crowd scene from the Marquee, and me and my two mates are in the back of the crowd scene at the back. And you know when you're a kid and you're only 17 or 18 years old.
Rock and roll heaven.
It is exactly that. It's rock and roll heaven, you know what I mean? So people say, what's your claim to fame? And they think, well, I'm playing for England doing this. I'm on a Lurkers album, mate. You know what I mean? So that was fantastic. Stiff Little Fingers we saw.
Yeah.
But Stranglers and Stiff Little Fingers were probably the two that I would say are the ones I like the most. Stranglers, definitely. I've got to know the band better than anybody else. If we're up in Yorkshire at the in-laws, we meet up and have a little bit of breakfast together because Baz lives up sort of just outside Leeds. And,
You actually appeared in a video, didn't you?
We're watching the videos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about it.
Yeah.
You almost, I'd say you play yourself. You're this guy hunting somebody down, you know what I mean? And, so how did that, what did they want you to do, or where was it filmed? I want to know everything.
Yeah. This was, I was at West Ham on the coaching staff, right? And I'm driving along one day, and JJ, the bass guitarist, JJ Burnell, rings me up and said, we got a new album coming out. We're releasing a single, this song off the album. Said, would you fancy being in it? So I've gone, yeah, I'll help you out if I can. So I was pretty cool, but you know what it's like when your favourite ever band. I was like, get in! And then it dawned on me, shit, they're mates. What if I cock it up that badly that the relationship goes
it's sour.
a bit like that? So anyway, I said, yeah, look, I'll help you out, do whatever I can. They said, brilliant. All we do, we'll send you all the lyrics along, learn the lyrics, which I'm not great at, to be quite honest with you, but learn the lyrics and whatever. So that was fine. I learned that. And he said, we're going to film it in Vauxhall in South London, over in an estate, on Monday, the 14th of August, I think it was. This was about 3 years ago. West Ham were playing our first league game of the season away at Newcastle. I can't go in and say to Moisey, are we in on Monday or not, because I'm filming a Stranglers video. You just can't do that with Moisey.
Oh, I played with him. I know you
know,
can't.
you know what I mean? So this fella, like, with Moisey, you can only ever think about football. You cannot think about anything else. And that's for me walking in as one of his coaching staff and saying, when you know him, you know exactly what I'm saying. So I've got my fingers crossed we get a day off. If we haven't, I've got to go and ask him. As luck happens, we go and win 4-2 at Newcastle on the Sunday. Monday we're off. I go and meet over. I don't know what they want from me. I really don't. We've never talked about it or anything. I thought I'll just be sat at a table.
Well,
just
doing Reservoir Dogs in the
front and centre, like, and it was brilliant to do. And he was quite laid back as well, like, and Carol, my wife, got her elbow in shot as well, which was always nice, you know what I mean? So it was just brilliant. And I weren't sure how it was going to come out. And when I saw the final product, I thought, my God, you know what? I don't give myself much credit for much, but that's good.
Yeah.
And the song's a throwback as well.
I've seen the video. Did you have a stuntman doing the jumping over walls bit?
Al, you're damn right I did. I can't get over walls like that anymore. And to be fair, the stuntman looked older than me, to be quite honest with you. But they were all the parkour boys jumping around, and you know what I mean? It's become quite popular. But, maybe 30, 40 years ago I'd have done my own stunts, but no, I just popped up every now and then and started walking and talking.
Nah, brilliant. Well, I did a little bit of research, and what amazes me is the Stranglers were way before anything, they were one of the first. Yeah. They really were one of the first.
Well, they formed in 74.
Yeah, 74.
That's,
Jet Black, was it?
Yeah. He was a jazz drummer in the 50s, Jet, and owned an off licence, and he had an ice cream van. He had a fleet of ice cream vans, and that was their tour van. They used to go in an ice cream van.
Rock.
And they met, I think Hugh Cornwall met JJ in Sweden. They were living in Sweden together and come over. And the punk thing happened, and they were almost resented by the punk fraternity because they were that little bit older.
Yeah.
And when the Ramones come over,
well, they opened for the Ramones and Patti Smith.
Yeah,
both of them.
So when they come over, like the Damned and the Pistols, they're all a bit pissed off with this. They thought, hang on a minute, how the Stranglers got this gig when we're front and centre of the punk movement?
Because everyone attributes punk to the Sex Pistols. Everyone goes past. There's so many before that AP, and then this famous gig in the Free Trade Hall in Manchester. Remember the Sex Pistols, where they say that such and such he was there and he was there, and then they all go, if it wasn't for the Pistols. I'm saying, I've done my research here. If it wasn't for the Stranglers, and to be fair, the Ramones were around, and American punk rock was there. So Pistols take a lot of credit, and I'm friends with Glenn Matlock. So what a band, brilliant. But the Stranglers, the more I've looked into it now,
Well, one thing that fascinates me, you say the Stranglers. Now, I know you've been in two bands. The first one was called Dog Chewed the Handle, and now Cold Blooded Hearts. Yeah. How on earth do you come up with these names?
Believe me. Have you ever tried to name a band, right?
No.
It's hard enough naming our kids, right? So to name the band was so hard. I'll tell you the story on both, right? And then Stuart can say why the Stranglers, because I think they were called
The Guildford
Stranglers, weren't they? Yeah.
There was a mass murderer called the Guildford Strangler.
Oh, no way.
So they dropped the prefix Guildford.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah.
At the time, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Dog Chewed the Handle. We were in rehearsals and we were a covers band with Dog Chewed the Handle, but we put some originals in. We wrote a few of the originals, and lucky enough to say the man next to me seen one of our originals in Camden we played recently. But we all put a name in a hat, and we just said, look, and our bass guitarist, there's a band called Terrorvision. Again, AP, you won't know anything about, okay?
Correct.
Terrorvision had a band, and they were a band, and they had a song called Dog Chewed the Handle. And all we wanted, honestly, as a band, I think...
So it wasn't original then?
So the name's not original. The name's not original. No band has ever been called Dog Chewed the Handle, but there is a song called Dog Chewed the Handle. But all we wanted was people to remember it. Yeah. So I think my input was... I think I was the Flicks, because I always like the something. So I'm like, I was the Flicks. And they were like, that's rubbish, Flick. And then we pulled out Dog Chewed the Handle, and we all went, yeah, we're going to remember that. Everyone will remember that. Yeah. So Dog Chewed the Handle became the name. And
Cold-Blooded Hearts.
Cold-Blooded Hearts, I have to give credit to the lead guitarist, Lee Sargent. He wrote one of our songs, Cold Road, and there's a lyric in that song called This Cold-Blooded Heart. And do you know what? We just wanted to sound cool, so the Cold-Blooded Hearts will do for that one. But yeah, naming a band is tougher than you think. Honestly, I'll bet. You ever get there, believe me, it's tough.
I know you've got some really interesting questions to ask Stuart about his favourite songs and why they're.
So we're coming to a part now, Stuart, which we're going to ask every single guest, and I think it's going to be interesting to find out what guest says what and why they say it. So as always, I'm going to tell you my story. So the first question is, first record you bought or first record you wished you bought, all right? So as I say that, I'm a 12-year-old boy in Blackburn, and there's a record shop called Reedy's in Blackburn, and you go down, or 13, I can't remember what it was, early 80s, 81 or something. So my first one was Adam and the Ants, all right, Kings of the Wild Frontier.
Yeah.
So I bought that. So I'm pretty happy with that. I wouldn't want to change that. So we're giving you two options here. I think the next one might have been Bucks Fizz. Don't kill me, all right? But I think I did
Making your mind up.
Making your mind up, and I thought, beautiful. Only because it was so popular at the time, but looking back, bad move, AP. Bad move, that one. But Kings of the Wild Frontier, Adam and the Ant, I'm thinking, okay, that's pretty cool. That was my first one. Have you got one, or is it embarrassing and you wish you'd have got another one?
I've got one, and I'm quite happy with the one I got. You're talking about some of the embarrassed ones. You particularly, we're hoovering them up at the moment. Carol bought me a Wurlitzer jukebox.
Oh,
so
nice.
we're getting. I was at a record shop in Amersham today. Bought 27 singles.
Yes.
Of varying stuff. So we're hoovering up vinyl as we speak.
It's the Wurlitzer that plays the vinyls. It's not the Wurlitzer that's got the Wurlitzer front and it's a digital. No, it's a proper one.
I've got one.
This, you got one of them? Oh my God.
No,
couldn't afford the real thing.
No, this is real deal. When you hear the little crackling of the needle.
Yeah,
wow.
It takes 50 singles, so it's fantastic. Yes. So you'll have to come round and have a little
definitely.
Cup of tea and a listen. Right, first one, my brother Dennis was into music and he's 10 years older than me, so he was a big influence to me. The Who, Cockney Rebel, Sensational Alice Harvey Band, they're all these. But David Bowie was the original. So Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, the album, was probably the first one. If I had to swap that out for anything, it would be my favourite single of all time, Anarchy in the UK. Because it weren't just a great single, it stood for everything.
It was emotional. It did.
Yeah. It stood for everything that come after that, you know what I mean? It was brilliant. But Ziggy Stardust, and I was hoovering up all the Bowie stuff, to be fair, in the sort of
I have
70s.
to give that the ultimate cool stamp from the podcast, because that is some record. Wow. By the way, AP?
Oh, this is going to date me, isn't it? The first record I ever bought was 1958, and it was by an American singer called Guy Mitchell. The second one was Frank Sinatra. Everybody's heard of him, obviously. What was the other part of the question?
I said, first one you bought.
Quickly.
First one you bought, or the one you wish you'd have bought?
The one I wish I'd have bought. Well, if I spin on a couple of years, because I was born and brought up in Liverpool, I never got to see the Beatles live. And I would have loved to have bought that first album of the Beatles, which I still think is the best thing they ever did.
Yeah.
I think when they went a little bit crazy later on and it got a little bit psychedelic and everything.
When the sitar came into their tunes, it was a little bit, yeah. I'm thinking, what's going on here? Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I'd have to say, I mentioned Liverpool. I grew up on the Kop. I started following Liverpool when they were just a poor little second division club, and then a guy called Bill Shankly walked through the door and changed everything. And you used to have to queue up from 1 o'clock to get a decent space on the Kop. Because if you got caught on one of the crush barriers, this was days, of course, when everyone was standing, or nearly everyone, you were in trouble, because that was... So we would get there at 1 o'clock, and they just played non-stop Beatles, Jerry and the Pacemakers music, and of course, that's how You Never Walk Alone became a big hit for Liverpool. And I went to a European match a few years ago at Celtic, who also sang You Never Walk Alone, their fans. Jerry Marsden was invited by Martin O'Neill, who was the manager of Celtic at the time, to come and sing it before the game. Of course, normally You Never Walk Alone is just one section of the crowd, isn't it? The Liverpool fans, the Kop.
Saying all four.
The whole stadium, 50,000.
Wow.
Oh, it was a hairs on the arms, honestly. And Jerry, an experienced singer and everything, I spoke to him when he came back in, and he was shaking like that. It was such a frightening experience for him to get that right. No. So You Never Walk Alone.
No, okay. Well,
it's amazing how sort of musicians as well. I mean, I was up at Newcastle Saturday, and the second to last song that they played before the band comes out is the Ramones Blitzkrieg Bop, which is a real...
Another punk tune.
A brilliant punk tune. And Southampton run out to The Saints Are Coming, which is the Skids.
Yeah, Skids back in the
a lot of them
70s,
a lot of the Saints players wouldn't even know that it's a punk band called the Skids. I bumped into Stuart Jobson, who's front man of it, and he's eternally proud that I think what's the Scottish team, St Mirren ran out to that, Southampton ran out to it.
When I played at QPR, London Call,
exactly that.
And Mick Jones is a season ticket.
Yeah.
In the stand at QPR, and it was like, wow. So punk has a massive connection in football there, So anyway, we've gone on to the two. I think you've answered two there, Stuart. I think you've answered the first time you heard it, and then Anarchy in the UK. You say that's your song. That's
my favourite song.
That's the one.
I pushed for one.
You had to push for one song, which is difficult, by the way, because I've tried this.
Yeah.
So then comes to the last question. We're going to ask everyone: best live performance.
Difficult. I'd probably see a band a week. On average.
And thanks for coming to see me in Camden.
Well, as you know,
just before Christmas,
at the drop of a hat, we'll go.
We were there.
Mate,
we were there. Yeah.
That way.
There's a little bit of trouble getting you on the guest list, but I managed to get.
You've done well for us. I'll tell you a memorable one that I went to when I was a kid. Don't know whether not sure. It weren't my first gig. I went to see the Damned at the Rainbow. Right. And we, in those days, used to get there at 7 o'clock. So you run the gauntlet of skinheads, teddy boys beating you up, the underground, football supporters, you name it. You've got to avoid all that just to get to the venue. So went inside at the Rainbow, iconic venue in the music world, as you know, in Finsbury Park. And Support come on, don't know who they were, watch them. Then they've gone off, 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock come, Damned ain't shown up. 9:30's come. The punk fraternity at this stage are getting a little bit boisterous. They're ripping the seats out and throwing them on stage.
Boisterous.
So they're launching.
That's quite tame for them, really.
It was fairly tame. 10 o'clock's come, no sign of the band.
Oh, no.
Right? So by this stage, they've ripped all the lower tier seats up and thrown them on stage. 11 o'clock come, they still ain't on. So you can imagine it's carnage. 20 to 12, the band come on and say Vanyan's not turned up, the lead singer. So the three of them have come on. They've launched all the seats back at the crowd to clear the stage. So they've thrown them back at the crowd. Next thing, from the side of the stage, Dave Vanion's run on because he was into this Nosferatu, you know?
The vampire stuff.
So he's got a bald head adapter on, and with his big ears sticking out, and he's come running on, and they've gone into an Off They Go love song or whatever it was.
Oh, wow.
And like at that stage, the crowd started throwing the chairs back because they've got the chairs all back in the crowd again. It was just bedlam. It really was, and that was memorable for me as a young kid. When I was like, I was up the first tier, looking down at all of this carnage going on. But it was brilliant.
I think I can sort of connect with that, because I think my love of rock and roll and the hair metal that I was in, probably that few years later that I was born. Mine was the Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses. That sort of and it. You know what it is, AP? It when you're that age, it is that chaos. It's that on the edge of that chaos of just, you know what I mean? I think that's why a lot of people love that type of music. They're just on the edge and they're thinking, this could go off at any time. And we have to admit, as human beings, you almost love that. You're waiting for
Edgy.
it, you know, it's edgy.
Yeah.
And you wait. And it's like when we watch a football game or something, you wait for that big tackle, for it all for a massive melee on the pitch. You love watching that. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
You love watching that melee on the pitch. And I think that's very similar to when you're at a gig or when you hear that reckless band, you know, just on the edge. I think that's the attraction for me.
I think we're really lucky as well. In the era we grew up, you could walk down the street and look at anybody and say, I know what music you like. You could see a punk, you could see a Teddy Boy, you could see a ska, someone dressed in ska. You could near enough tell what music they liked by the fashion they were wearing. I think we've lost that a little bit, which I find quite sad.
Yeah.
But as I say, the other side of that is, if you're on the London Underground and you see a group of Teddy Boys, you got a hot for it. You know, if you're dressed in your punk gear. And it used to be wearing... I went through a stage when I was at school. I went to watch the Boomtown Rats, and the keyboard player, Johnny Fingers, wore pyjamas, right? That was his stage thing. I can see a few heads nodding in the background there. So I took my pyjama top in and got a big V for Vibrators across. That was a band, by the way, not a pastime.
We just went X-rated.
Yeah. So I got Vibrators and the Lurkers screen printed on the back of my pyjamas. So I used to wear my pyjamas around the street. That was my thing. And then I ended up, in the old days, you know, the bog chains. They used to be low flushers, bog chains. I used to nick them and wear them.
Yeah.
And we used to go in the pub and everyone, one of the boys who was into the punk said, my snout tells me bog chains are in, you know what I mean? and I'm stood there with a bog chain around my neck and everything, and the Blue Dog studied book.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. You could play with fashion. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
But you never told Cloughy that story, did you?
No, he didn't need to know basis out.
No, awesome. Brilliant. And honestly, Stuart, the music side of things, as I say, I was talking to doing the research on the Stranglers. My big band was the Doors back in the 70s, 80s, absolutely, well, 60s, 70s, not 80s. It was gone by then. They were quite psychedelic as well. The Stranglers, for their time, you know, they were quite out there really, of the band and what they were producing. And they've gone on again to this next Bowie and Blondie, and then the alternative in the 80s, and then in the 90s. And we seem to not have that anymore. You know, not the punk like we did. You know, people try and do it now. But for me, that was the golden age, you know.
I think so. There were so many different genres. You watch an old Top of the Pops, and you can have a soul singer and then a punk singer come on, and then something else.
Yeah.
It was so diverse.
And
it was
the
incredible.
Old Whistle Test.
Yeah,
things like that.
fantastic.
I mean,
The tune
brilliant.
come on in the 80s.
I mean, New York Dolls, Stranglers, that kind of music. That's going back to your era, AP. They were way before proper punk. So we've got a lot to thank those guys for.
Well, I had my favourites. I said one of my big regrets is not seeing the Beatles live, but I have seen the Beach Boys live, and I would have loved to have been born in California. When I had hair, I had blondish hair, so, you know, strapping the old surfboard to the side of your Volkswagen and everything in California.
I'm not sure I can see you as a surfer, yeah? The Scouser surfer, yeah? Is that what we got?
Not in High Wycombe,
Don't
anyway.
say what you're thinking. So, yeah, I'm a dinosaur. I admit it.
No, great, AP.
However, I have come, with the help of my daughter, a little bit forward, because about 3 months ago we went to Las Vegas to see Shania Twain. I know you'll be horrified about that, but she was absolutely brilliant as well. And I just love her music, you know, that mix of country and western and folk and a little bit of pop in there as well.
Yeah, well, they have that sphere now, don't they? And all the top acts there. And I mean, like I say, back in the day, when Stuart's mentioning all those venues in Camden, I mean, I'm in Blackburn. We had King George's Hall, and that was it. If you weren't playing there, you didn't play anywhere. But down, lucky enough to, and I am lucky to have lived in London, played in London. It opens up such a world. Camden, for me, is probably the coolest place you can go to. It really is, you know, with all the venues around. We played Soho recently, just before Christmas as well, a venue called the Spice of Life, and it's just that edginess that you talk about. It's still just there, just slightly, just still there. You know, the markets, the punks on the markets, all the venues, they're still there, and I would urge anyone to get down there.
It's been absolutely brilliant. Fascinating listening to you, Stuart, about your football career and your passion for music. Exactly what this podcast is all about. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed our first edition of Shall We Sing a Song for You as much as I've enjoyed it, and I know
absolutely
you two have as well. Don't forget that you can catch us on Facebook, Instagram and X. We've set a high standard with this first episode. We'll make sure that the rest of the episodes are just as good. Many thanks to Stuart. Thanks again to Gaz. See you soon.